good afternoon or good evening to you, wherever you are. We are so glad to have you with us in this inaugural NCCMR webinar. NCCMR stands for the Network of Centers for Christian-Muslim Relations. We are thrilled that you could join us today with about 135 registrations from a wide range of countries. We deeply appreciate your interest, and we hope that you find this session valuable in your work on Christian-Muslim relations. As we all know, 2/3 of the global Christian population and the majority of Muslims live in the majority world, where access to academic resources is often limited and opportunities for meaningful interfaith dialogue are scarce. As we enter a post-secular era, fostering positive interfaith relations has become essential for promoting peaceful coexistence within societies and global harmony. Scholars and practitioners who engage in deep theological discussions between Christians and Muslims, particularly in regions like Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, are in a unique position to influence these relationships and contribute to global policymaking. With this in mind, the Network of Centers for Christian-Muslim Relations, the NCCMR, was established on March the 1st, 2024, with support from the Templeton Religion Trust. NCCMR is a network of distinguished centers focused on Christian-Muslim relations, recognized for their impactful work in facilitating dialogue and engagement in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. There's a growing need for both local and global engagement that bridges culture and religious divides. NCCMR aims to promote such engagement, foster peace, cultivate faith-based values, and support human flourishing through cross-cultural exchange and religious literacy. We envision a world where Christian-Muslim relations are grounded in mutual understanding, respect, and collaboration, contributing to a culture of peace and harmony. NCCMR seeks to connect individuals and organizations, facilitate knowledge sharing, exchange lived experiences, and foster mutual learning and curiosity. Our goal is to build lasting relationships and empower members to drive positive societal change while working toward a shared cause. Effective collaboration depends on mutual understanding, which is why NCCMR is committed to enhancing cross-culture and religious literacy. Our efforts include promoting collaborative exchange and producing cross-cultural media and art that benefit societies. The network is focused on creating focused on creating a homogeneous melting pot, as some people would think, but rather on celebrating diversity to deepen understanding of both ourselves and others, with the goal of serving the common good. Christian-Muslim relations centers in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East are already doing outstanding work to promote societal cohesion, mutual understanding, despite the limited resources they have. NCCMR aims to strengthen their capacities by fostering connections, providing project development training, securing third-party funding, and coordinating collaborative action. The hope is that by linking these centers, their combined efforts will make a more significant impact and serve as a model for interfaith cooperation. NCCMR focuses on capacity building and aims to shift from mere tolerance to collaborative engagement, ultimately fostering a true sense of partnership between Christians and Muslims. By deepening understanding of each other's theological and faith principles, members can amplify their impact, expand their initiatives, and reach a broader audience. Our goal is to extend the influence of the network, benefiting the wider community through various initiatives and projects. To achieve these objectives, we have several key initiatives in progress. Number one is the annual Symposium of Christian-Muslim Relations. This symposium will rotate between Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. This year's symposium will take place in Amman, Jordan, from the 16th to the 18th of June. Be sure to mark your calendars and stay tuned for more updates. Two, online diploma program in Christian-Muslim relations. We're finalizing details with the International Dominican University to offer this degree. This European accredited diploma will be launched in September this year. We encourage you to consider enrolling. Also, stay tuned for further information. Three, the Contextual Dictionary of Christian-Muslim Relations. This is a major undertaking. This project will feature about 100 terms and themes related to Christian-Muslim relations. 42 contributors from 22 countries will provide academic insights and contextual perspectives on each term. We are also exploring more initiatives to further our mission. Today, we are privileged to have Professor Azza Karam with us. Professor Karam is a renowned peace builder and advocate for mutual understanding and Christian-Muslim relations. My colleague, Dr. Ghassan, will introduce her shortly, but I want to take this moment to express my sincere gratitude for her unwavering support for the network. Her generosity has been invaluable. I personally felt supported so many times by her. I am so grateful we have her, and I'm looking forward to learning from her. Dr. Ghassan, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Dr. Wajih, for the introduction. I will take a brief moment after welcoming our guests and, of course, our guest of honor, Professor Azza Karam. When I told Professor Azza Karam that I am going to try to narrate her biography, she told me good luck. And and I understand why I need it. It's a long, impressive track record full of accomplishments. However, one can say that Professor Karam knew the right areas of interest at the right time, and that with a lot of dedication and a fair amount of ingenuity won her the fame she now deserves. The career, the start was with her work, Women, Islamism and the State, Contemporary Feminism in Egypt. It's an ethnographic research on gender that shook up some prejudices about women in the Muslim world. She told the world that not only is there a feminist movement, but studying the case of Egypt, she distinguished three tendencies: secular feminism, Muslim feminism, and Islamist feminism, and demonstrated that the frontiers between them is oftentimes very blurry. From there, she moved on to editing a number of influential volumes in the domain of gender, politics, and religion. Women in Parliament, Beyond the Numbers, appeared in the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance. All female contributors, I found out. She also edited A Woman's Place, Religious Women as Public Actors. This came out of the World Conference on Religions for Peace. Also all female contributors, and I think this performance was very important so that the substance reflects the form and vice versa. After the unfortunate events of September 9/11, she edited Transnational Political Islam, and with this carefully selected volume of carefully selected contributors, she demonstrated her ability to deal with gender issues, political issues, but also with more global and wider phenomena. In that case, transnational political Islam, which was just starting, and very few people could predict with any degree of accuracy where it will end. The world we see today is testimony to a a vision and a clairvoyance almost of where things were going. And I think this ability to look ahead and see where things are going on a political and social level vis-a-vis religion is Professor Karam's main talent. This won her chief executive officer of the Women's Learning Partnership after doing a few relatively minor jobs at the United Nations, such as senior advisor on culture at the United Nations Population Fund and senior policy research advisor at the United Nations Development Programme and coordinator for the UN Arab Human Development Report. However, her work in NGOs, her independent record continues in serving as Secretary General of the World Conference of Religions for Peace. Religions for Peace shortly is the world's largest, bar none, international coalition of representatives of religions dedicated to promoting world peace. The establishment is more than 50 years old. We all know what it is. I really cannot, without any kind of false pretensions of reverence to her achievements, I really cannot count them all. But one achievement that to me is understated in its importance is that she co-founded and chaired the United Nations Interagency Task Force on Religion and Development. This task force, which was founded in 2010, provided policy guidance around engaging with faith-based actors and deepened UN system staff capacities around intersections of religion and UN pillars of development, human rights, and peace and security dynamics. And of course, providing strategy policy guidance. When we talk about an interagency task force, we're talking about an advisor that advises all advisors and a level of influence that permeates the entire organization. It has an unusual name, but it is an unusual task force. And I think this is promoting knowledge of religion to the level of strategic political thinking is definitely something that we owe to the generation of Professor Azza Karam and her colleagues. And I will stop here. Recounting, I hope I did it some justice, the biography of our speaker. Welcome, Azza. Before I give you the floor, I want to explain very briefly why there is a moth and the fabric on the poster of your lecture. The moth, I'm sure we all know, was a symbol of the fool in the old Asian and Far Eastern mythologies. This symbolism persisted in the Islamic tradition in Quran and Hadith, namely. The unfaithful are represented as moths that are racing to the fire, while the Prophet is racing to save them from their fatal behavior. The church fathers did not attach any positive connotation to this poor insect either. The moth destroying the well-knitted fabric became a symbol of the detractors that destroy the unity of faith by attacking the legitimacy of scripture. The text and the textile being attacked by moths are etymologically related. The moth, however, foolish and destructive as it may have been, was redeemed in the work of Al-Hallaj in his Tawasin and Farid al-Din al-Attar, Mantiq al-Tayr. The moth rushing to the burning flame and being annihilated in the process became a symbol of the believer's union with God. For the wisdom of the Sufis, this creature, although it might appear to be a fool and behave like a sinner, is guided by a divine logic and may be closer to God than most think. Today, many moths are destroying the fabric of our social cohesion. Some have malign intentions. Others are ignorant fools. God alone knows what their hearts hide. But Professor Karam has an informed opinion on how to deal with them and what to do next. Professor Karam, please, the floor is all yours. I look forward to it.
Thank you very much. I'm actually quite overcome by your beautiful narrative, and especially the narrative about the moth. It's deeply touching because you've evoked precisely that which our Sufi and more mystic, learned people have understood, which is that when we seek to serve in the name of that which moves us deeply, i.e., our faith, it is not always a journey of flying to the sunset and living forever, but in fact, it isn't necessarily a journey towards physical immortality. It may well be, and very often is, a form of sacrifice to something much bigger that may take away our bodies, that may actually consume us so completely, such that it is the passion of faith. So thank you for that very, very beautiful introduction. By the way, when I said good luck, I didn't mean because I have so many achievements, good luck summarizing them. On the contrary, what I was trying to intimate is, good grief, how are you ever going to describe when I struggle to describe what I do and what I did? But you did such a beautiful job. I'm definitely going to use the recording in other contexts. Next time I'm being asked for a bio, I'm just going to say, would you please just listen to what Dr. Hassan Al-Masri says right here, and you've got the whole picture, and I have much, much better than I did, actually. So thank you. I am obliged to you for this. It is a tremendous privilege for me to be with you all. I know that you have shown so much appreciation for me to be with you, but the truth is that this is the light towards which the moth of my spirit is very much magnetized too. I am delighted to have this opportunity. It is a privilege in every way to be able to be with you, and also because I intend to be deeply candid and honest, which if you know me, you would not be surprised. But if you don't know me, please prepare yourself for a shock, because it can be a bit shocking to be so brutally candid as I tend to be. I intend to be provocative. I'm not belittling, but I need us to be much more mindful of the good and the not so good, because the discourse about interfaith dynamics and relations has, in my own lifetime, shifted dramatically, from contexts where it was not really mainstream. In some cases, in some policy contexts, in particular within institutions, especially international institutions, it was considered completely unnecessary, totally irrelevant, and really problematic. You know, if you brought anything to do with religion into a secular space, it was a bit, to put it politely, it was deeply frowned upon. And it's shifted 180 degrees, such that I recall joining the UN and being told in UNDP, we don't do religion. We just don't do religion, right? This was in 2004. We don't do religion. We do we do human development. We do everything under the sun, but somehow without religion. Which for me, as an Arab, was a bit like, well, what do we do then exactly if we're not doing it? How do we understand human development? How do we understand the human psyche without understanding the impact of the religious? But I had come from a background in which, as you very kindly related, when I worked on the very first book, which is Women, Islamisms, and the State, it was originally about political Islam and human rights and governance, the tension, that triangle of tension that we see today in almost every country in the world, a triangle in which governance, politicized religion, and human rights form the tripod on which much of today's public discourse is actually being arranged, discussed, debated, put aside, so that even political parties which just a decade ago would not have deigned to think of anything religious, remember, they didn't do religion, are today having spokespersons who articulate their political platforms in religious terms. They are religious terms, they are Hindu religious terms, or they are Jewish religious terms, or they are Christian religious terms in their diversity, or they are Muslim religious terms. So we've suddenly seen a public space shift from, yeah, really, let's just keep religion as a side, even in countries ruled by religious regimes. The religion was the business of the regime, but not the business of the governance and laws and legislation, which is fascinating to observe in some contexts. Or it was selective. Yeah, when it comes to women's rights, we have to observe certain religious stipulations. But on anything else, it's okay, we're secular. This has shifted, and it has shifted in our own lifetime, so to speak, to the context where today, when I look at my colleagues in the UN system, whom I trained and I worked with for 2 decades, and I realized that the discourse has evolved from we don't do religion to religion is absolutely central to everything we do, which is kind of nice because really we've woken up and smelled that coffee. On the other hand, given the extent to which some religious discourses are subject to severe political manipulation, and vice versa, some political discourses are subject to severe religious manipulation, it makes us wonder, wait, what do you mean? So religion is now the solution? Which, remember, used to be the motto of the Muslim Brotherhood. Islam is the solution. So it puts us a little bit on the very, how shall I say, concerned. I'm being politically correct. One is concerned by this evolution because we understand, and of course one maintains the remarkable necessity of faith in our lives. The moth attracted to the flame of faith, of course, but there is a difference between that understanding of self and relational dynamics and between the politicized narratives that are today undermining the very fabric of peaceful coexistence. So, but I go ahead, let's just, for a minute, let me share with you the journey of interfaith as we understand it today, as it has been for, by the way, interfaith dialogue is the oldest known form of human dialogue ever. Yani, since time immemorial, people have been doing interfaith dialogue because faith has always been part of the understanding of self and other and society and governance forever and ever and ever. It's only our modern day societies that seem to have taken a bit of a while to go through secular and then come back to religious and whatever. That's just within the last 75 years max. But traditionally, interfaith dialogue has been the way we have as humans coexisted, because we have each had our faith tradition and we've each lived together in different auspices. But what is interfaith dialogue? Can I just begin by saying what it is not? Because part of it becoming such a popular frame of reference today is generating a great deal of misunderstandings, as if interfaith is about a new religion, creating a new religion, or creating the conditions for a new form of religious understanding. And that is absolutely what it is not. Interfaith dialogue is about relating to one another as people of faith, but very much rooted in our respective faith traditions. As a Muslim, I relate to my Christian, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist, by the way, a whole panorama of faiths, indigenous person of faith, not because I'm trying to change my religion or to adopt a new one, but because I'm actually seeking to understand myself and my fellow human better. I am seeking to be even more strongly rooted in my faith, to my own faith tradition, because I am relating it to yours and trying to understand how it is that you too are touched by that divine inside your soul. How does that happen with you? What does that look like? And in so doing, the soul that I have, the spirit that I have, that is part of the divine, becomes in connection, in communion, in relation with you. It is not to create a new faith, but it is indeed to strengthen our sense of faith. That is what interfaith is. And what it is not is trying to merge religions, whatever religion, into one. No, that is absolutely not it. Being aware of what interfaith dialogue is as the oldest form of human relationship building and social cohesion and coexistence, as the way of expanding the spirit of the divine within ourselves and in our communities, that interfaith has been going on, that interfaith dialogue has been going on for many, many, many years. And indeed, it has over the, even just our own 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, led to the emergence of not only national interfaith groups or movements or events, but to international interfaith spaces, which can, if we wanted to look at institutions, interfaith institutions, we can date it back to in the 1880s or 1890s, when something called the Parliament of World Religions first was hosted, convening people of faith from every single imaginable faith tradition. And it still goes on today, till today. The convenings of the Parliament of World Religions are the largest single convening of diverse faith traditions from everywhere in the world. You will find every kind of believer in those spaces, from the ones with the ordained clergy to the ones with the singlet and the guitar and the tattoos who believe. Okay, you get that entire, it is absolutely fascinating. The Parliament of World Religions was established way back in the 1880s. It's the first interfaith or institution or organization. Eventually, we started to see a number of different institutions emerging, which were carrying out forms of interfaith dialogue. What is not known to many people is that after the Parliament, one of the first international interfaith organizations was created by a woman, and it is called the Temple of Understanding. And it still exists till today and doing some very interesting work. I will just provide a bit of I'm not in any way this is not a comprehensive coverage of the interfaith organizations around the world, but I do want to mention a few that have done some remarkable, interesting work, that have set patterns and standards, if you will, to how you do interfaith dialogues. So I mentioned the Parliament of World Religions, established in 1889. This set the trend for the meetings, the global meetings that would convene people from all over. The Temple of Understanding was established in 1960. Religions for Peace, the organization that I had the privilege to serve for 4 years, actually for 8, because I served it before as a program officer and came back as Secretary General. Religions for Peace was established in 1975. United Religions Initiative in 2000. The Royal Institute for Interfaith Studies, as one of the examples of the Middle Eastern, if you will, of the ones housed in the Middle East, it was one of the first to be established in 1994, again with a global, multi-religious or interfaith mandate. A very definite shift in interfaith dialogue took place with the establishment of the King Abdullah International Center for Interreligious and Intercultural Dialogue, CAICID, in 2013. And I will come back to that in a minute, but to why this was a shift. But it was a shift because, unlike these other initiatives, global interfaith initiatives, which primarily brought together either religious institutions or religiously ordained clergy, or people of faith who were not ordained, but moved by their faith tradition and wanted to meet and to converse and to do things together, CAICID significantly changed the tenor because they brought those religious leaders alongside 3 governments to form part of the infrastructure of leadership of this global interfaith institution. Now, you know that religious institutions and religious leaders have a certain momentum, a certain dynamic, a certain way of relating to one another that goes back a long time. But governments are a new addition, if you will, and they bring a different tenor as well as a different kind of standard and policy of debate, discussion, discourse. So CAICID was the first global interfaith organization to try to bring together the intergovernmental, even though only 3, but still 3 different governments, Saudi Arabia, Austria, good grief, I should know the third, Spain, as the co-founders, together with different religious leaders representing different religions. So it was a new way of governing and convening interfaith dialogue. And by then, it was very clear that it could not just be more meetings, because, of course, every time they created an interfaith institution after the Parliament of World Religions, every time a new interfaith organization was established, international interfaith organization was established, it built on that pattern of convening and convening and convening. With CAICID, it became convening plus providing research, doing tracking certain interreligious and intercultural initiatives. It became more than the act of meeting and went into the policy making. What kind of policy guidance does this interfaith space actually provide and lead to? So there was a subtle but very definitive shift in interfaith relations from communities learning with one another, engaging with one another, to religious institutions, religious leaders, and governments engaging to influence policy at the global level. In 2014, the G20 Interfaith Forum was established. And then in 2018, the Interfaith Alliance for Safer Communities. And they too follow this praxis of we will meet regularly, excuse me, and we will provide analysis, policy papers, meet with government officials, and try to influence the way decisions are made about issues relevant to what is understood as the common good. So this is a very interesting, if you will, trend on the international space. Now, I am not speaking to the multiple national and regional level initiatives. I am specifically looking at it from 10,000 feet, the global interfaith organizational space. And I'm doing that because I'm trying to track at that broad global level what interfaith looks like. How did it get institutionalized? What is it exactly? Now, having said that, as the emphasis of interfaith dialogue shifted or became more nuanced, shall we say, it depends on how you want to describe it, but let's say as it shifted from we are meeting together as people of faith, even as religious institutions, to learn about one another, it shifted to how can we influence public discourse through government officials, through academia, through think tanks, through whatever means. So a very definitive shift. Now, the interesting thing that I neglected to say, please bear with me. One of the frameworks that describes interfaith dialogue best, in my opinion, is a framework developed by the current Minister of Religious Affairs in Oman, and how he describes it, the interfaith encounter, is, and he describes it in Arabic. It is about معرفة, تعارف, اعتراف. Now, the stages of interfaith. We get to know, learn about one another and ourselves. We get to relate to each other through this knowledge that we are evolving of ourselves and one another. And we acknowledge, we see one another in a deeper sense of not just I can see you right now or you can see me, but in the sense of being able to see the spirit and to recognize the spirit in the other. So it's that stage that we arrive at after we have learned about one another's respective beliefs. We have related to them and to one another, and we now, we acknowledge, we recognize the spirit in one another. So it's a beautiful methodology that he has evolved. Muhammad Saeed al-Ma'mari, the Minister for Religious Affairs of Oman. Again, so it's not mine. I am actually referring to what he has developed and evolved. I think that is a beautiful description of what interfaith dialogue, how it is, what it is like. And it doesn't matter that it's not in Arabic. We're talking about interfaith dialogue generally, as that we arrive at the common, we see the spirit in one another. We acknowledge the spirit in one another. Now, that shifted with the increased institutionalization of interfaith organizations, international interfaith organizations. It shifted from, right, we see one another and, we really like what we see and we're getting to know ourselves better. But now we shifted into how can we influence together as multi-religious? How can we influence public discourse? How can we play a bigger role as religious leaders and religious institutions in the public space? And that influence, or that shift rather, is absolutely critical. Why? Because apart from the fact that it moves us, if you will, from the realm of spirit to the realm of realpolitik, how do we influence policy, educational policy, health policy, you name it, foreign policy? You shift, but khalas, you're not talking about only recognizing one another and being more deeply spiritual, if you will, but you are now talking about how can we as religious actors play a more prominent role in the decisions that affect our lives. Yes, in the very practical decisions that affect our lives. Now, for some people, that is a wonderful evolution and development. It goes against this notion that what is this secular business? And no, we've always been religious as humans, and secular has simply alienated and marginalized the religious and the spiritual and and it's led to a lot of harm, and we have to go back to our roots. So for some people, this is the evolution in the right direction. How do you re-engage as religious actors? How do you re-engage publicly? Which then means, frankly, how do you re-engage politically? Okay, that is significant, in my opinion. I'm not judging it. I'm simply describing what that shift has entailed. Now, one would think that in that remarkable decades of recognizing one another and then shifting towards being public influencers of governments and policies, you would think that this has actually led to more engagement with one another, actual joint programs, initiatives of service to the same populations that we come from, and that you would think that we can now see a legacy of joint programs done between Christian and Muslim and Hindu and Buddhist and Jewish organizations together in the same countries, hatta. Okay, maybe at the global level, Tayyib, we see more, right? Because we've now evolved into impacting on public policy. We want to be responsible for public policies and the politics around us and so on and so forth. So we're working together, right? No. The shift towards impacting on public policy, having a role in public space, has actually not been accompanied by a deepening of joint service to communities. And COVID-19 pandemic was an excellent example of that. The common understanding was, okay, the whole world, the planet as we know it, is now impacted by a pandemic. It doesn't matter if you're in China or if you're in South Africa or if you're in Chile. we are all facing the same pandemic, the same range of disease, okay? There is a global lockdown. It's the same thing we're all facing. But now we can work together, right? Because we're working in the same communities, with the same people, on the same set of issues. So are we now pooling our resources together, especially when you consider that anywhere between 30% to 70% in conflict settings. In normal settings, the average percentage of primary healthcare, the average percentage of primary healthcare being delivered in any country, north, south, east, west, rich, poor, 30% of primary healthcare average is being delivered by religious institutions. 30%. When we're talking about deeply secular, we're talking about Europe, North America. In fact, a statistic came out in 2012 in The Economist indicating that 70% of hospitals in the United States of America, 70% of hospitals were run by and through the Catholic Church. That is not taking into account the Protestant churches, the Muslim and the Hindu and the Buddhist and the Jewish network of primary healthcare that is around this country. This was just the Catholic. So can you see how significant the religious sector is to the primary healthcare? So, global pandemic, you'd think that all of these will now work together because they're serving the same things in the same places. The amount of joint partnerships that took place between, let's say, in the United States, again, let's just take that as an example because that's supposed to be a secular country. But let's look at Europe, Western Europe. How many efforts that brought together the Catholic and the Protestant and the Muslim and the Jewish health service to actually serve together, you will find the percentage pathetically low. Because in fact, what happened is not that these religious institutions stopped providing care. On the contrary, they had to ramp up by 250% their care service delivery. But they did not try, or they may have tried and failed, to work together, to actually collaborate, to partner, to serve together in a global pandemic. So an instance, an example, and it's not unusual. The reason I gave the pandemic as an example is because it was a global thing. It wasn't just happening in one part of the world. So the response that we would have expected to generations of interfaith dialogue did not result in interreligious service. So there is an interest on the part of some multi-religious institutions to be more influential in the public policy space, but that is not the same as serving together communities. So hugely significant for those of us who are students, not only of religion, but of religion and politics. And by the way, my original PhD research was on political Islam. And I was told very clearly at the time that if I pursued this research, because I was literally researching Islamist organizations who were not exactly on the good side of the state, I was told very clearly, if I continued to do this research, it would have very negative repercussions on me and my family. So I had to rephrase. I did not change the subject of my research. I rephrased it, putting women and women's rights as the presumed center. In fact, I was still showing the range of Islamist movements in my own country and how they functioned, how their relationship with the state went, comparing it with other countries in the Middle East, and saying, now let's see how this impacts human rights and let's zero in on women's rights. Because women's rights, you see, at that time, until today, some people misunderstand that women's rights are the safe thing. Let's look at women, they're safe. They were safe for me then, so that I could complete my PhD and not harm my family. But you understand how this sensitivity about religion in the public space is. But in this case I cited of my own research, it was the state that was deeply sensitive about how the religious would be portrayed, how their relationship with the religious entities would be portrayed. What we're seeing today is the religious entities and institutions ostensibly doing interfaith who are interested in impacting on the states, of having an influence on governance. So that's the shift that we can see in the interfaith space. I refer to it as going from the spirit to the material. You can go from the spirit to the material, by the way, and it's a very lovely thing because you're serving together. So in Religions for Peace, I was shocked to realize that in spite of the remarkable role that religious institutions provided, not just in the medical health space, by the way, not only in public health, in education, in sanitation, and you name it, the original social service providers, were the religious institutions. Long before there were governments, we've had religious institutions serving communities since time immemorial. So when we now look at this, at the scape of so-called social services, we realize that a significant portion of these social services are being provided through religious institutions. The point here is that rather than interfaith dialogue connecting to this space of public service and seeking to serve jointly and expand outreach and save on resources, that was not happening. But at the same time, these are the same religious institutions who kicked into full gear for human, and still do. The ones on the ground all the time, they don't have to be flown in, they don't have to be transported, they're there already in humanitarian emergencies, are the religious institutions. We hear about UNRWA and the travesty of what's happening to UNRWA. We don't hear about the fact that those that continue, that have been before UNRWA was established and will continue till time immemorial, are actually the religious institutions that are delivering humanitarian relief to millions. That's the reality. And yet, in spite of it, very interesting to see, in spite of it, this incredible service to humanitarian relief, which is basic and absolutely essential, was not and is not being done jointly. And it takes a UN entity like, UNHCR, UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, to try to bring these, the Islamic Relief and the World Visions and the Caritases to coordinate their efforts. It takes a UN entity to bring together the religious to try to coordinate their efforts. Interesting that, because when it is left to them, and I'll give you the example that you might never expect, which is something that happened in New York City. Anyone who knows New York City or has even heard about it will have heard about something called Central Park. You heard about Central Park? An icon of New York City. There was a time in March of 2020 when the global lockdown was declared. New York was identified as an epicenter of COVID. Hospitals were overflowing. None of those hospitals could serve because the rates of infection and affection were much higher than what public and private hospitals were able to deliver. An ICU, intensive care unit, was hugely necessary. A religious organization came forward and said, we're going to set up a massive ICU unit in Central Park to accommodate the overflowing demand that was necessary. That particular religious organization was approached by another one from another religion. And they were asked, can we help? Can we work together to help you deliver this? And the response to them was, we got this, it's okay. To me, this is an incredible example of a window of opportunity that was rudely shut let us help. Where is the harm in having different religious institutions delivering at a time of tremendous need? I was told the headache of coordinating is just it. And I know that, and it is true. It is true. Coordinating different organizations. Oh my goodness, you know about this now. You've got a network of networks. The headache of the coordination can sometimes make your heart weep. Okay, it's probably a lot easier to just go and do the things yourself on your own, hatta, without people. So the headache of coordination was posed as why would we buy into that incredible headache when we can serve, we can deliver the services ourselves? Yes, and as you do so, the stamp, the imprint of your institution is also very clearly there. This absolutely necessary ICU center was provided by, just so happens, religious institutions and organizations are not immune from the need to survive. Religious institutions and organizations are not immune, even though they serve and have served for centuries humanity. They are not immune from territoriality. In fact, they are probably the original definers and practitioners of territoriality. Now, in a context like ours today, in which you speak about deeply divided societies, divided along lines of ethnic, divided along lines of religious, divided along lines of race, divided along lines of class, divided along every single imaginable line. And for the first time in our history, modern history, it's not just that one part of the world is divided and the other part is doing okay. Actually, polarization, social, political, cultural, and financial polarization is a universal phenomenon today. It defines our world today. So in such a world, the territoriality of the religious becomes most especially problematic. This is the time when it's about interfaith dialogues, what should have been the natural outcome thereof, which is interreligious collaboration in service to all. Every single religious organization will say, but we don't distinguish, we don't discriminate between who gets our services. We serve everybody. Absolutely true. So then if you don't discriminate against who gets your service, why don't you work together to serve, to provide those services, to make it a point of practicing the social cohesion that we need? And what better form of earning the fabric of social cohesion than to serve all together, than to actually bear the headache and the heartache and the challenge of coordination that is absolutely horrid, but we bear it because this is the service ultimately that our spirit calls us to, unless we're very interested in the logo. And if we're very interested in the logo, then where is the call of the spirit going exactly? Interfaith dialogue has created the space for interreligious or multi-religious collaboration. It should be possible because we have already, supposedly, we have already shared the spirit of the divine with one another. Why will I not stand alongside you and serve? Why will I not give you what I have in terms of resources so that we can combine, so that we can do more, so that we can reach more, we can be better? Why won't I do that? And what is the excuse when I am a religious organization? What is the excuse for not doing that? When I created the Multi-Religious Humanitarian Fund, because there was no such thing as a Multi-Religious Humanitarian Fund, there was hundreds of religious humanitarian funds, hundreds. Every single religious institution of any worth has a humanitarian and is a huge servant in the humanitarian space. There wasn't a single multi-religious humanitarian fund. We created it. We said, look, the only criteria to apply for seed money, the only criteria to apply is that you're going to be working together across different traditions. So we got some applications that said, well, we've got the Pentecostal, we've got the Baptist, and we've got the, and they enumerated a whole bunch of Christian organizations. And we said, that's absolutely lovely, wonderful. There are other institutions who can support that kind of effort. We're actually interested in you working across different religions completely. That was the only criteria. And you can show us that you've actually done something before together so that there's a track record. Halas? Fabulously interesting to observe the results. And the results were as follows. Not a single big religious organization from the major religions, was prepared to contribute to the multi-religious humanitarian fund. They're perfectly reasonable. Explaining was, we have one of the largest humanitarian funds and operations in human history. We're good, thank you. You know, good luck to you with that, but we've got our stuff. We've already got enough of a headache. Thank you so much. We're busy delivering and serving everybody. Why would we have to contribute to something else and somebody else's puppets? Why would we do that? So lesson learned number one, not a single big religious institution or organization or community wanted to contribute to a multi-religious humanitarian fund. Second lesson, those who did apply, none of them were the high-level religious establishments or institutions or NGOs. They were individuals who had come together at the height of that COVID pandemic. They were individuals from different religions who came together and pooled their respective resources and were asking for a little bit of support so that they could do more work together to serve their community. Anything back from doing masks to taking food to the people who had lost their income, a range of initiatives. They were individual believers who had come together and said, let's do this, let's serve and let's get a little bit of resource. And they had already pooled some of their meager resources together, and they just needed that additional boost and support so that they could do more. Lesson number two, at the community level, not at the religious institution level, not at the political institution, at the community level, a great deal of this interfaith service happens. Lesson number three, 75% of the applications came from young people, largely women-led. It was that cohort. And in some of these cases, when they did the work together, it caught the attention of their respective religious institutions because it caught the attention of some of the media. So suddenly their respective imam or pastor or whatever it is was like, yes, of course. Yes, we do this. Yes, absolutely. Wonderful work. Yes. Yeah. Where were you when they were looking for support in the beginning to work together? So interesting how that in spite of the fact that the institutionalized religious spaces that are doing interfaith dialogue and have been involved in it for so long may not be the ones to step up. In fact, are not the ones to step up to serve together, to serve the spirit together, not just to speak it, not just to recognize it, but to actually serve the spirit together. The younger ones and the young women were like this. They got it, they did it, they delivered, and it was amazing. And that gave me hope because I was so upset by then. Like, hey, how is it possible that nobody wants to put $1? They put $1, make it nominal. No. But that reaction, the applications that came in from some of the most amazing groups, and they did remarkable work. Within short periods of time, they managed to do magic, subhanAllah. That gave me hope. And I realized one thing. We are at this moment in time, especially given how we've seen the reaction of a number of different youth organizations, faith-inspired and secular, in different parts of the world to what is happening in the Middle East, what's happening in Ukraine. And we're seeing some of the youth veer towards the politicized religious movements because they're the only ones serving as a resistance and resilient whatever. But we're also seeing a large swath of young people who are determined to make a difference, to object at least, and to build resilience. And I think that that's where we have to orient those of us who want to serve the interfaith dialogue and interfaith collaboration space. We need to be mindful and determined to identify, to be approached by the younger generations who are not only willing to serve together, but who believe who believe that this is the way that they can be better believers of their respective religions. That is the cohort that will keep us alive and will keep this planet alive. That is my faith right now. I leave it at that. I hope there's tons of questions and whatever. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Azza, if I may, for the presentation. Your life experience is a lecture in and of itself. This one comes from our colleague Hannah in Singapore, and she writes, serving humanity together is crucial, but can faith also play a role in centering morality and the ethical? For example, elevating the sanctity of human life in the public sphere in the very corrupted world that we live in now. So, working towards a common human ethical objective, to what extent do you see that is possible?
The whole point of multi-religious collaboration is precisely to operationalize, to realize the centering of the morality and the ethical. We can talk about it. It is being talked about all the time. How in heaven's name did what a woman does with her body become a key issue in the election of one of the world's superpowers over decades? Because we talk about the morality and the ethics of how it is that we're supposed to serve our respective faith traditions. There's plenty of talk, and so much of it is incredibly valuable and helpful, and has been the result, by the way, an outcome of a lot of interfaith dialogue. The point that I'm trying to make is we need to move from speaking it to realizing it through serving communities together. That is morality and ethics in action, and we need to see that in action and to speak of it.
I'm reminded of course, the work of Hans Küng and his work on a world ethos, Weltethos. Certainly, the work of great ethicists in the history of philosophy, like Immanuel Kant and John Stuart Mill and so on, were definitely translating religious belief into rational human terms. So much can be done here. Another question that I had, and I also see is being reflected in the among the audience, is religion and climate change, religion and the environment generally. We have all seen that there's more money for it. There is more and more people thinking about it. Would you please comment on the issue?
Sure, and I can tell you from working in the UN system on and with religious organizations, up to 700 of them around the world, that there is a great deal being done where they come together on what they believe to be common concerns. And environment and climate change is definitely one of those common concerns. Why? Not only because it's actually really common and we're all breathing the same air and drinking water and whatever, but actually because it's the least contentious politically. So there's coalitions that come together around, multi-religious coalitions that are coming together regularly now at the Conference of Parties, at the COPs. There is now a regular space. They even have a pavilion where civil society and religious organizations host their own, manifest their own presence, have their own discussions and conversations, share their projects and programs. That is now part of, since the last couple of years, that has become a regular part of the Conference of Parties. So you have the governments meeting at the COP, and you will have the civil society meeting, and they meet. There's literally a bridge kidda between the two spaces and sites of meetings, and there is a faith pavilion with the civil society for the civil society itself. And it's interesting because the faith pavilion is called the Faith Pavilion. It's not called the Civil Society Pavilion. It's called the Faith Pavilion. And that's where the religious organizations come together to showcase their work and some of the partnerships that they are indeed seeking to enact. So you have, as an example, you have a Faiths Invest space where the different specifically Catholic organizations, but some Protestant organizations come together to try to redirect the investment of their respective institutions in such a way so that it's more green impact and policy. You see what the Buddhists are doing on greening their own sites of worship. You see what the Muslims are, etc. So you see that has indeed already become a norm in the international gatherings around environment and climate change. You see the same in the biodiversity COPs. Religious institutions come together. Now, my pet peeve is they come together to talk about their respective remarkable work. The examples of where they're actually working together are still, to me, they're happening for sure, alhamdulillah, but there's still a tiny drop in an ocean of need to serve together. So it's not about whether we can translate the religious into the mainstream. I think that's the oldest thing that's been done since time immemorial. I think it's about whether we are able to actually give our most precious resources to one another, because part of the whole interfaith thing, part of that ma'rifah and ta'aruf and i'tiraf, recognition, we recognize the spirit in one another, which is absolutely phenomenal. But are we able to give to each other that which we hold most dear, to share, which by the way, is a central tenet in all faith traditions, from the indigenous to the Baha'i and everything in between. A central tenet is you give to those in need. You give to one another. You don't give when you're doing really well only. Of course, you give then, but you're also meant to give when you're not doing so well, when you've got so little to share. That's precisely the point. That's where faith makes a difference. So the question is, are we giving to one another? Are we actually sharing our resources with one another as religious institutions? Because we are happy to give to the UN. The UN today, UNICEF, UNHCR, UNDP, they actually receive money from religious NGOs. They don't give, they receive money from religious NGOs. And the question then becomes, wait a minute, you're more comfortable giving your money to the United Nations than you are to sharing your resources together to deliver basic needs together? Why? That's my question. That's why I'm not saying it's not happening, that there is interfaith, and on the contrary, it wouldn't have happened that we are at the stage we are today. We wouldn't be coexisting at all if we were not having interfaith and interreligious dialogue and translating the basics of our religious and ethical values into something called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, by the way. I mean, where did that come from? That came from the common values to all faith traditions and cultures. That's already been translated into the most amazing document ever. How come we're not now, as religious institutions and organizations, coming together to serve, maybe just even serve some of the basic human rights together, fight for them together? Some of the original human rights defenders, ala fikra, some of the original human rights defenders that the world has ever known were religious leaders and actors. So liberation theology, anyone? The incredible transition, that an effort it took and sacrifice across Latin America from military regimes to semblance of democracies, that was done thanks to liberation theologians and activists who sacrificed their life. We've seen that across history in different contexts. So why aren't we doing that together? And we've got the Middle East burning right now. All of us are burning. Christians and Muslims are like, where are the joint efforts of Christians and Muslims in serving the basic needs of their communities now? Where? And why are they not the most well-known thing ever? That's my question.
Professor Karam, there are lots of people, some of them are already posting questions here, and others always ask us, are we calling for mixing Christianity and Islam in some melting pot and creating this third religion? Are we calling for syncretism? This is a concern, a real concern many people have when they hear of our focus, our engagement in Christian-Muslim relations. They are so concerned that we are calling for some third religion, i.e. what is being really talked about a lot in the Middle East, the Abrahamic religion. Are we calling for a third religion when we call for interfaith relations, especially between Christians and Muslims?
When we share common prophets We share common prophets. Christians and Muslims and Jews share common prophets. Abraham, anyone? Isa, Musa, come on. We share a heritage of common prophets, but we have very distinct religions, and we are committed in different ways to our respective religions. The amount of time people say it was through interfaith dialogue that I became an even more committed Christian, or an even more committed Muslim, or an even more committed Jew. The point is, we are sharing the spirit of divinity, acknowledging it in one another, not creating another religion. There is a big difference between having a common heritage of belief, between having a light that burns within, and between trying to amalgamate everything and create something new. Unfortunately, that human tendency is there. It's part of what many of us do. It's part of why many of our institutions fail, ultimately, because we're trying to create new institutions that do new things and new ideas. And actually, the spirit is right here. And when I relate to you through interfaith dialogue, I am honoring your religion, your spirit. And I said, in the very beginning, I said, let me define what it is not. What interfaith dialogue is not. It is not about creating a new religion. It is not about amalgamating our religions into one. We have plenty of religious values. People who are so worried need to work that question backwards to themselves. What are they so afraid of? Why would we fear that we might be trying to create another religion? Are we not secure in the spirit within? Do we not want to rediscover the spirit within, that is within and within you, that it does not have to be another new faith tradition? It just has to be an acknowledgement of the existence of the spirit of the divine within you. And then hopefully we can evolve as human beings towards actually being able to serve as a Christian, as a Muslim together, to serve our communities together. Sharing a common heritage of prophets should be an inclination to serving the common. Noah did not say, yo, I'm creating a new religion here. You come on this boat only if you're going to be on that. No, he said, you believe? Are you going to believe in the one God? Yes. Okay, welcome. But if you decide you don't want to believe in the one God, khalas, stay. It's okay. You stay where you are. The quintessential interfaith, it's not tolerance, ala fikra. It's not tolerance. Tolerance is like, okay, I'm tolerating you. No, interfaith is about seeing your spirit as it is, named as you name it, formed by the beliefs that you have, seeing it as equally beautiful, relevant, necessary to mine, and seeing us together as both praising the divine, both serving the divine within our respective faith traditions. Because the divine, ala fikra, created us different. Yani, would it have been so difficult for God to make us all alike? No, it's very clear in all our faith traditions. Had I wished to make you all alike, yeah, I would have created you all alike. I created all this amazing universe around us, but I kept you different. But why? Because you're so meant to be. You're meant to get to know one another. You're meant to get to relate to one another, not to form a new religion, but you're meant to relate to one another, to learn more about yourself and me as the divine, says God. That is what we're meant to do. To shy away from wanting to relate to people from other religions, from wanting to engage with people from other religions, is a sign of insecurity, deep insecurity. It is not a sign of tolerance even. We haven't got to tolerance. We are deeply insecure. And we live in a deeply insecure world, so it makes a lot of sense that people are deeply worried. Ida, how come? What is this? What's this new Abrahamic? Yeah, I mean, who said that? No, Abraham has always existed. Oh, have we not always? Don't we pray as Muslims to Abraham? 5 times a day we have to mention him and everyone else that was there that we share as Christians and Muslims. Do we not share this? Absolutely, we share it. We pray to Abraham as Muslims. So what? What are we so afraid of now that we pray to him 5 times a day, but we are afraid of conversing with those who also believe in him from another faith perspective? Why? Well, they're mentioned in the Quran. They're mentioned in the Bible. People of other faiths are mentioned. So what are we so afraid of? We have to engage. And it's an obligation. As far as I'm concerned, it's an obligation on every single Muslim. تعرفوا. It's a job. It's a duty. It's an obligation. It's not something you do when you have some time. It's something you're created to do.
Takes me to a question that was posed and that I also had. The youth. It seems some in the audience understood or maybe misunderstood the comment about the youth being more inclined towards religiosity. And they believe that no way around, we're turning away from religiosity. There is definitely, I see it among my students as well, that there is a greater interest in religion among the youth. Now, are they interested in the right things? Do they have their hearts and minds turned to the proper things? That remains to be discussed. Could you comment on the youth's renewed interest in religion?
Yes, I think you see, as you said, you see the two kinds. You see the ones who are, and I mentioned that, you see the ones who are becoming attracted out of a huge sense of, if you will, desperation, anger, at what's happening, especially in the Middle East. You see a number of them moving towards wanting to serve in very radical, very extreme, religious contexts, because they seem to be, these radical or extreme religious contexts seem to be the only site of resistance and resilience to them, right? So how many people do you know who have argued that, you know what, Hamas and Hezbollah, they're actually, that's the only thing that's there that's going, because this army or that army or this national entity is not doing enough of a good job to defend our rights. So you have that. I think it's actually a very small minority, frankly. But you also have at the opposite end, those who, from the younger generation also, same cohort of age, but very different in inclination, who are inspired by their respective faith traditions and want to, and are in fact working alongside. And those are the ones who, when I mentioned the Multi-Religious Humanitarian Fund, the applications that came from these groups of very young people, who were diverse in every way, religiously, gender, even class, but they came from the same countries, but they wanted to work together. And they were seeking support so that they could do more services together. And that, I think, is what gives me hope. And I think that that's actually the majority that we see. And they're not all faith-inspired or faith-based. Some of them are also not faith. So they work together across their faith traditions, and they work with those with no faith tradition. And that, to me, is a sign of exactly that, what's the word? The spirit of service that I think all faiths call upon us to have. So even those who have no faith but want to serve together, that's the spirit of service that I think is even more faithful than, so many other ritualistic religious observances. So I think we can see the youth going in all directions, but especially I see the larger cohort going towards wanting to work together, wanting to serve their common interests together in a very constructive, very, I think, very enlightened and beautiful way. And that's what I would like to see us learn from, as the slightly more skeptical, at least I speak for myself only, the more cynical, skeptical elder ones who are like, what is going on? But seeing this as a source of hope. I want to see more of that. And I want them to continue to instruct me in that spirit of what I think is selflessness, because it's a commitment to the common good more than it is a commitment to a respective individual interest. It's actually a commitment to the common good. I think that group of youth, and I already tried to answer Brian, thank you, Brian, for the question, is to say, I'm not urging anything but for us to learn from that group and see how we can support them more, if they ever want our support, by the way. Some may not. But these younger people give me that hope that they are committed to one another, and they're committed to the common good in a way that I think our institutions today are not doing such a good job of, because they're so busy being territorial and arguing for their own survival. I also want to say, and this was a kind reminder from Michelle, if you'll allow me, please, Michelle Beach, who is my partner in Lead Integrity, has reminded me to say just a word or two about it, which I'm not very good at, but here goes. We are a great number of faith-inspired professionals We're not faith-based. We're not representing a particular religious institution or a faith tradition. We are faith-inspired, different faiths. And we're professionals in almost every sphere of public service. We are professionals with multiple years. The youngest amongst us has maybe like 20 years of service in different public service spaces. We're putting ourselves out there to address the hunger for what faith inspiration is and what it can do, and why would creating a community program with young people, what difference would it make to do so from a faith-inspired perspective, from different faith-inspired perspectives coming together to develop that program? What difference would that make? And we believe that our faith inspiration, especially because we come from such different faith traditions, such different parts of the world, but we're all committed to the common good. We believe that that faith inspiration is an added value spiritually, in terms of knowledge, but also in terms of expertise. So what I've decided to do in my life that I can't believe how well you summarized. In fact, it just sounded like somebody else. That is coming from my faith inspiration. That didn't come from somebody giving me a book and saying, you need to do this, and then you need to do this, and then you need to do this. This was my faith inspiration. It led me in those different directions. I feel I was listening and being guided in these different spaces to serve in those different ways. That skill set of being faith inspired and acquiring different skill sets and now wanting to give back to our communities and our nation in a time of deep polarization, that's what Lead Integrity does. It's a group, and we're women-led. I think we're the first women-led, faith-inspired collective of knowledge consultants. And we literally have everything from the rocket scientist to the ones serving medical professions to the ones teaching in elementary school, the entire range of public service, the faith-inspired professionals. We have men partners who are faith-inspired, bardu, also different faith traditions. This is what Lead Integrity is. It's an attempt to affirm that understanding that our inspiration, that our faith inspiration is an inspiration. It is also a skill, and it contributes to the knowledge, to the wisdom of the how to coexist. So that's us, and that's our attempt to be faithful together, without one of us seeking to be, well, my religion is better or my understanding is, but no, we all understand that if you believe and you're serving and you want to serve together alongside, hook up. Yeah, let's do this together. So that's what Lead Integrity is about.
As our time is reaching the end, we have 5 more minutes left, but I have an important question coming from my friend Imam Abdul Karim from Nigeria.
Yes.
Imam Abdul Karim says you equally talked, of course he's talking to you, you equally talked about public re-engagement, reconnection, and shared divine spirit among interfaith community. How can we situate this in the current global turmoil? It's a big, big question, but I hope you can address it in this very short time left. Thank you.
So I think we need to distinguish as faith actors, as faith-inspired actors, shall we say. And I think Imam Shafi'i, with the work you're doing already, is a great testament to that, is an answer to the question that you're posing. We need to situate our wisdom, our inspiration, our knowledge in a way that is not tailored towards the welfare of only one kind of community or only one set of interests. I think the best ability to impact on even public policy may not be by sitting in government desks or forming government institutions or working with political parties. It may not actually be that way, but it may perhaps more be in exemplifying how we can pool our precious resources together with one another across the differences that we have. Even in your own country, in my own country, we have many religious and social and cultural differences. How can we pool our resources together to serve jointly the common needs? I believe that exemplifying how we do that, being committed to doing that, and making mistakes and learning from them, because there is no right way to do this. We're going to make mistakes anyway. But that commitment to serve alongside one another, not just to engage and talk, which is very, very important, and I think it's being done already, but actually to actually pool our resources together. Whatever little I have, I'll add it to yours, Heck, I'd even give it to you. And we'll still make that journey work. We'll still make those services get delivered. We'll still serve our communities in different ways together. That example is what we're lacking in the political space, in the financial space, in the social and cultural space, because we're so busy claiming attention and territory and resources for ourselves. We need not to take resources. We need to give the little that we have to one another and serve with that the whole that we can. That is how we can exemplify public service and impact on public policy. We exemplify. We're looking to religious leaders to exemplify that. Not to only extol the virtues of their respective faith traditions, not only to extol the virtues of their respective religious institutions, not only to extol the virtues of their historical legacies. We're looking to religious leaders and religious institutions to show how they can collaborate, share the meager, so-called meager, even though actually they're not meager at all, share whatever resources they have together in service to their communities, actual practical services to their communities. There is enough need. There is enough need. And there is enough resources if we can collate our resources together. We point to governments, we point to the UN and say, you're not giving us. Okay, let's give each other. Let's give each other.
There is lots of need and there is lots of work that can be done. Thank you so much for today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your insight and for some provocative ideas as well. You challenged us, as you said in the introduction. I just want to thank everyone again for joining us today. I know we had people from different countries. Many people were active in the Q&A chat area. And we thank you for participating. I think on May 27th, this coming May 27th, we will be hosting Professor Adnan Mokrani in our next webinar series. We will send you more information about the 27th webinar with the theme and the other information. So please be on the look for some emails from us. Thank you, Dr. Hassan, for coordinating this event. And Professor Azza, we are so grateful to have you, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.